When five notorious bikers confronted a lone woman at Riverside Diner, they thought they'd found an easy target. Instead, they encountered a Force Recon Marine captain who would not only transform their lives but change an entire community. What happened that evening would be viewed millions of times online, spark a movement of veteran support, and show that sometimes the greatest battles we fight aren't on foreign soil, but right here at home. Let's get started, but first, let us know in the comments where you're tuning in from. If you enjoyed today's story, don't forget to subscribe because tomorrow's story will be even more epic. Sarah Mitchell sipped her coffee at her usual corner booth in Riverside Diner, savoring the quiet evening atmosphere. The small purple heart pin on her denim jacket caught the fading sunlight through the window, the only visible sign of her 3 tours in Afghanistan. At 35, her athletic frame carried the quiet confidence of someone who had seen more combat than most, though nothing in her relaxed posture suggested she was anything more than another customer enjoying a peaceful dinner. "Here's your usual, Sarah," Betty said, refilling her coffee cup. The veteran waitress had been serving at Riverside for over 2 decades, and she'd grown fond of her quiet, regular customer. "How are things at the Veterans Center?" "Making progress, Betty. Got 3 new vets starting computer training today. It's good to see them finding their way back." "You do good work there, honey. Though I still can't believe you never mentioned being a Marine captain all these years. Some things are better left quiet. Besides, that part of my life is behind me now." The diner's bell chimed as the door swung open. Instead of the usual evening crowd of families and tired workers, 5 members of the Steel Vipers motorcycle gang swaggered in. Their leather cuts bore patches that spoke of trouble, and their leader, a hulking man known as Razor, carried himself with the aggressive confidence of someone used to intimidating others. Well, what do we have here?" Razor's voice carried across the diner. "Looks like we found ourselves a real friendly place." Sarah watched their reflection in the window, her tactical mind automatically assessing the situation. Razor stood about 6'2", probably 240 pounds. His second in command, a wiry man with a snake tattoo crawling up his neck, kept his right hand near his vest pocket. The other 3 spread out across the diner, their boots heavy on the linoleum floor. "Hey, sweetheart," one of the bikers called out to a young waitress, deliberately knocking over a glass of water. "Looks like you got a mess to clean up." The waitress, barely 20, kept her eyes down as she gathered plates with trembling hands. A mother with 2 small children at a nearby booth began quietly gathering her things, trying not to draw attention. "Oh, what's wrong with the kid?" Razor laughed, turning toward the sound of a child's whimper. "Maybe Mama needs some company to cheer her up. The lady and her children are leaving. Step aside." Sarah's voice cut through the tension, calm and clear. The diner fell silent. Razor turned slowly, his eyes finding Sarah in her corner booth. "Well, look what we have here, boys. Seems like someone forgot their manners." "Actually, I learned my manners in the Marine Corps. 3 tours in Afghanistan tend to teach you a thing or two about respect." Razor's laugh was forced, uncertainty flickering in his eyes as he took in Sarah's confident stance. "Marine Corps? You expect us to believe that?" "Don't have to believe it, but you do need to let these people leave." "You know what happens to people who get in our way?" Razor growled, reaching into his cut. "Actually, I do. But the real question is, do you know what happens when you threaten a Force Recon Marine?" The mother had managed to gather her children behind Sarah, who subtly shifted her stance to provide better coverage. Betty had disappeared into the kitchen, hopefully calling the police. Sarah calculated response times in her head. 5 minutes minimum for the first patrol car to arrive. "Last chance to mind your own business, lady. Protecting civilians is my business. 15 years of military service didn't end when I took off the uniform." The biker with the snake tattoo lunged forward suddenly, attempting to grab Sarah's arm. His move was telegraphed, amateur, nothing like the trained fighters she'd faced in combat. Sarah stepped smoothly aside, using his momentum to send him stumbling into a booth. Dishes rattled and silverware clattered to the floor. Razor swung his brass-knuckled fist in a wide arc, but Sarah had already anticipated the move. She ducked under his swing while simultaneously sweeping his legs out from under him. The big man crashed to the floor with a thunderous impact that shook the diner's windows. "You're going to regret this," Razor snarled, struggling to his feet. Blood trickled from a cut on his lip where he'd hit the floor. "Nobody messes with the Steel Vipers." "I've heard that kind of talk before," Sarah replied calmly, "usually from people who don't understand what real combat looks like." Two more bikers moved to flank her, while the third blocked the door. Sarah remained centered, her breathing steady, hands relaxed at her sides. The training that had kept her alive through 3 tours was about to serve a different purpose, protecting innocent people in a small-town diner. "Get her!" Razor roared to his remaining men. But as they moved in, they were about to learn why Force Recon Marines were considered among the military's elite fighters, and why this quiet woman in a diner was about to become an internet sensation, a community legend, and a symbol of hope for veterans everywhere. What happened next would change not just their lives, but an entire town's understanding of strength, service, and redemption. The viral video would be just the beginning of a story that would touch millions and remind everyone that sometimes the most important battles we fight are the ones that bring people together rather than tear them apart. As Razor and his men closed in, Sarah Mitchell allowed herself a small smile. She hadn't asked for this fight, but she was about to demonstrate why you don't mess with the wrong woman at the wrong restaurant. "I said get her," Razor shouted again, but this time there was uncertainty in his voice. The next 30 seconds would go viral on social media, racking up millions of views and changing life in their small town forever. Sarah moved with the fluid precision that only comes from years of combat training. The first biker charged in, throwing a wild haymaker that would have knocked out most opponents. But Sarah wasn't most opponents. She slipped inside his guard, redirecting his momentum with a simple shoulder turn. The big man went flying into an empty booth, crashing through it with enough force to splinter the wood. "That's one," Sarah said quietly, already moving to face the next threat. The biker with the snake tattoo pulled a knife, its blade glinting in the diner's fluorescent lights. "Not so tough now, are you?" "Actually," Sarah replied, her voice still calm, "you just made this easier." She gestured at the cell phones recording the scene. "Assault is one thing. Armed assault, that's serious jail time." He hesitated for just a moment. Exactly what Sarah had counted on. Her kick sent the knife spinning from his hand before he could react. A quick strike to his solar plexus followed by a sweep of his legs, and he joined his friend on the floor. "That's 2, Sarah continued, turning to face Razor and his remaining man. "What the hell are you?" Razor's voice shook slightly. "I told you. Force Recon Marine. We're trained to handle multiple armed opponents. You're making this too easy." The third biker looked at his fallen friends, then at his boss, then at Sarah. He raised his hands and backed away. "I ain't fighting no Marine," he said, heading for the door. "Smart man," Sarah nodded. "Now it's just you, Razor. We can end this here." Instead of answering, Razor charged, brass knuckles glinting. Sarah sidestepped smoothly, years of training taking over. She caught his arm, used his own momentum to spin him around, and suddenly Razor found himself face down on the diner floor, his arm locked behind him in a hold that sent waves of pain shooting through his shoulder. "Listen carefully," Sarah spoke softly, but everyone in the now silent diner could hear her words. "I could break your arm right now, easily, but I won't because that's not what Marines do. We protect people. We don't hurt them unless we have to." "Let me go," Razor growled, but the fight had gone out of his voice. "First, you're going to promise me something. You and your gang are never going to bother this diner or anyone in it again. Understand?" Razor tried to struggle, but Sarah applied slightly more pressure. He gasped in pain. Okay, I promise." Sarah released him and stepped back, staying ready just in case. But Razor just sat up, rubbing his shoulder and staring at her with a mixture of fear and something else. Respect? "Your men need medical attention." Sarah pointed to the 2 bikers struggling to get up. "There's a clinic 3 blocks from here. I suggest you take them there, then go home and think about what happened today." The sound of police sirens filled the air. Razor looked at Sarah, then at his injured friends. "This isn't over," he muttered, but his heart wasn't in it. "Actually, it is," Sarah replied. "But how it's over, that's up to you. You can leave here tonight as the gang leader who got beaten by a woman, or you can leave thinking about why a Marine Corps veteran would risk herself to protect strangers in a diner." Betty emerged from the kitchen, phone still in hand. "Police are almost here, Sarah. You okay?" "Fine, Betty. How about you get these gentlemen some ice for their injuries before they leave?" The mother with the children stepped forward, tears in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "I was so scared." "It's okay now," Sarah assured her, keeping one eye on the bikers as they helped each other up. "You're safe." As the police cars pulled into the parking lot, their lights painting the diner windows in red and blue, Sarah noticed something strange. Razor wasn't looking at her with hatred anymore. Instead, he seemed lost in thought, as if seeing something he'd never considered before. Officer Martinez was the first through the door, hand on his weapon. He took in the scene, the broken booth, the scattered dishes, the shaken but unharmed customers, and the 3 battered bikers. "Everyone okay here?" he asked, though his eyes were fixed on Sarah. "Just a small disagreement about proper diner etiquette," Sarah replied. "I think these gentlemen were just leaving." Martinez looked at the bikers, then back at Sarah. "Want to press charges?" Sarah considered for a moment, then shook her head. "No, I think everyone learned something tonight. Didn't we, Razor?" The big biker met her eyes briefly, then looked away. "Yeah," he mumbled. "We did." As the bikers limped out of the diner, followed closely by the police, the other customers burst into applause. Sarah tried to wave it off, but Betty was already announcing that coffee was on the house for everyone. "That was amazing." A teenage girl approached Sarah, phone still recording. "Are you really a Marine?" "Was," Sarah corrected gently. "Now I help other veterans adjust to civilian life. Speaking of which," she turned to look out the window where Razor was sitting on his bike, still not starting it. "I think I might have found some new clients." The video would be uploaded within minutes. By morning, it would have hundreds of thousands of views. But what nobody knew yet was that this was just the beginning. The real story, the one about redemption, community, and finding purpose after combat, was about to unfold in ways nobody could have predicted. "Your coffee's getting cold," Betty said, sliding into the booth across from Sarah. "Thanks, Betty." Sarah picked up her cup, noticing her hand was perfectly steady, not even a tremor. "You know what's strange? That felt more important than anything I did overseas." "How so?" "Because this time I wasn't just fighting against something. I was fighting for something. For this place. These people. Sometimes the biggest impact we can have is right here at home." Little did Sarah know just how prophetic those words would prove to be. As she sipped her coffee and watched the police cars pull away, the wheels of change were already in motion. The Steel Viper's reputation for troublemaking was about to transform into something entirely different, and Sarah Mitchell's quiet life was about to become a lot more interesting. By midnight, the video had over 100,000 views. By sunrise, it was approaching 1 million. Sarah woke up to her phone buzzing nonstop with notifications, messages, and calls from news outlets across the country. "Force Recon Marine takes down 5 bikers while protecting diner patrons," read one headline. "Female veteran shows true meaning of leave no one behind at local restaurant," proclaimed another. Sarah ignored them all and headed to work at the Veterans Center, hoping for a normal day. But normal wasn't in the cards anymore. "Have you seen this?" Maria Torres, one of her veteran clients, burst into her office waving her phone. "You're everywhere. My daughter showed me the video this morning. She said you're like Captain America, but better because you're real." "It's not that big a deal, Maria." Sarah tried to downplay it. "Just did what anyone would do." "No," Maria insisted, sitting down across from Sarah's desk. "What you did was remind people that we veterans aren't broken. We're still warriors, still protectors. Do you know how many women veterans have been sharing this? You've given us a voice." Before Sarah could respond, her office phone rang. It was Betty from the diner. "Sarah, honey, you need to get down here. Something's happening." Trouble? Sarah was already standing up, ready to move. No, you should see this for yourself. When Sarah arrived at Riverside Diner 15 minutes later, she stopped short in the parking lot. The place was packed. People were actually waiting outside to get in. But what really caught her attention was the group of motorcycles parked in the corner of the lot. Not Steel Vipers, but other local motorcycle clubs. Inside, Betty rushed over to her. "They've been coming all morning," she explained, gesturing to the bikers scattered throughout the diner. "Different clubs from all over the area, but they're not causing trouble. They're apologizing." A large man in a leather vest stood up from his booth. His patch identified him as the president of the Road Knights MC. "Captain Mitchell," he called out. "Got a minute?" Sarah walked over, aware that the whole diner was watching. The biker extended his hand. "Name's Big Mike. I represent several of the legitimate motorcycle clubs in the area. What happened here last night? That's not what we're about. The Steel Vipers give all bikers a bad name. We wanted you to know that we're here to support this establishment and its customers." "That's unexpected," Sarah replied honestly, shaking his hand. "There's more," Big Mike continued. "We heard you run a veterans center. A lot of our members are vets. We'd like to help. Maybe set up a motorcycle maintenance program for veterans who need transportation, give them something positive to focus on." Before Sarah could respond, the diner's door opened again. Everyone turned to look. It was Tommy, the youngest of the Steel Vipers from last night, but he wasn't wearing his colors anymore. "Captain Mitchell?" His voice shook slightly. "Can I talk to you? Privately?" Sarah nodded and led him to her usual corner booth. The young man couldn't meet her eyes at first. "I was in Iraq," he finally said. "Army infantry. When I came home, I couldn't fit in anywhere. The Vipers, they felt like brotherhood again, you know? But last night, watching you reminded me of my old sergeant. Always in control, always protecting others. And now?" Sarah asked gently. "I want out. But it's not just me. Razor, he's been talking all night. What you said about being a protector instead of a threat, it hit him hard. He's got a daughter, you know. She saw the video this morning and called him, crying. Asked him why he was being a bully." Sarah sat back, processing this information. "What are you asking for, Tommy?" "Help. Not just for me. For all of us. Most of the Vipers. We're lost. Looking for what we had in the service. That sense of purpose. You showed us there's another way to be strong." The diner had gone quiet, everyone trying to listen in. Sarah was aware of the phone still recording, of how this moment might be another turning point. "The Veterans Center opens at 9, she said finally. "Come by tomorrow. Bring anyone who wants to change. We'll figure something out." Tommy's eyes lit up with hope. "Really? Even after what we did?" "Especially after what you did. Because you're proving my point. Real strength isn't about intimidation. It's about having the courage to change." As Tommy left, wiping his eyes, Big Mike approached again. "We'll help," he said simply. "Any of the Vipers who want to reform, they'll have support from the legitimate clubs." Betty appeared with coffee, beaming. "On the house, as always." "Betty, you can't keep giving me free coffee." "Watch me." The waitress grinned. "Besides, business is booming. Look around." Sarah did look around. The diner was full of an unlikely mix. Families with children, bikers from various clubs, veterans who had seen the video and come to show support. Everyone was talking, sharing stories, building connections. Her phone buzzed again. Another news outlet wanting an interview, but this time Sarah didn't ignore it. Maybe it was time to tell this story. Not just about one fight in a diner, but about veterans finding their way home, about redemption, about how sometimes the right kind of strength can transform enemies into allies. "Big Mike," she called out. "That offer about the motorcycle maintenance program, let's talk details." As she pulled out a notebook and began planning, Sarah realized that what had started as a simple confrontation was becoming something much bigger. The video had gone viral not just because of the fight, but because people were hungry for this kind of story. One where conflict leads to connection, where enemies become friends, where protecting others matters more than proving you're tough. And this was just the beginning. The next morning, Sarah arrived at the Veterans Center early. She wasn't sure what to expect, but she wanted to be prepared. At 8:45, the first motorcycle rumbled into the parking lot. It was Razor, alone, without his steel Viper's cut. "Didn't think you'd be first," Sarah said, meeting him at the door. "Couldn't sleep," he admitted. His voice had lost its aggressive edge. "Been watching that video over and over, seeing myself, seeing what we'd become." He pulled out his phone, showing Sarah a picture of a young girl, maybe 12 years old. "This is Amy, my daughter. She called me yesterday morning crying. Asked me when I stopped being her hero and became a bully instead." Sarah nodded, unlocking the center's door. "That must have been hard to hear." "Hardest thing I've ever heard, even harder than when her mom left, saying I'd never change." Razor followed her inside. "Thing is, watching you fight, it wasn't just about the moves. It was how you carried yourself, controlled, purposeful, like my drill sergeant back in basic before I got discharged." "You served?" "Tried to. Washed out of Army basic. Medical discharge, bad knee. Felt like a failure. Started running with bikes to feel strong again." He looked around the center, taking in the photos of veterans, the resources posted on the walls. "Never thought I'd end up here." More motorcycles pulled up outside. Tommy arrived with 3 other Vipers. Then came Big Mike with some Road Knights members. By 9 o'clock, the center's meeting room was full of leather vests and uncertain faces. Sarah stood at the front, looking at the unlikely group. "So, who wants to go first?" Tommy raised his hand. "I served in Iraq, 2nd Infantry Division. When I came home, everything felt wrong. Too quiet. Too normal. The Vipers gave me what I was missing. Brotherhood, adrenaline, purpose. But it was the wrong kind of purpose." Others began sharing. Out of 12 Steel Vipers present, 5 were veterans who hadn't completed their service for various reasons. 3 were sons of veterans who'd never found their own way to serve. All of them were looking for something they couldn't quite name. "Here's what we're going to do," Sarah announced, pulling out a whiteboard. "First, we're starting a motorcycle maintenance program. Big Mike and the Road Knights are offering to teach. Veterans who need transportation will get help fixing up bikes. You want redemption? Start there." She wrote more on the board. Community service, veteran support, family rebuilding. "Second, those of you who are veterans, we have programs here. Counseling, job training, whatever you need. Those who aren't veterans but want to support them, we'll find a way." Razor stood up. "I want to talk to my daughter's school, tell them what happened, show them how to be better than I was." "Good," Sarah nodded. "That's on the list now, too." The meeting ran for 3 hours. By the end, they had a plan. The Steel Vipers would disband, but something new would take its place. A support group for veterans and their families, centered around motorcycle maintenance and community service. "We need a new name," Tommy suggested. "Phoenix Riders," someone called out, "because we're rising from the ashes of who we were." The energy in the room shifted. These men who had come in looking defeated were sitting straighter, eyes bright with purpose. Sarah recognized that look. She'd seen it in countless veterans who finally found their way back to themselves. Later that afternoon, Sarah returned to Riverside Diner. Betty had saved her usual booth, but she wasn't alone. Maria from the Veterans Center was waiting with her. "Heard about this morning," Maria said as Sarah sat down. "Word spreading fast. You know what this means, right? That I'll never have a quiet cup of coffee again?" "No," Maria laughed. "It means we're seeing something new, something important. When that video went viral, everyone focused on the fight. But the real story is what's happening now." Betty brought coffee without being asked. The diner's becoming quite the spot, she reported. Veterans, bikers, families, all mixing together. Had some Phoenix riders in here for lunch. They helped an elderly couple change a flat tire in the parking lot. Sarah's phone buzzed. It was a message from Razor. Amy wants to meet you. Says she wants to learn how to be strong the right way, like her dad is learning. As Sarah typed a reply, she thought about how much had changed in just 2 days. The viral video had captured a few minutes of action, but the real transformation was happening now, in quiet moments and small choices. We're going to need a bigger veterans center, Maria mused, watching more motorcycles pull into the diner's parking lot. Word's getting out. Veterans from other towns are calling, asking if we can help start something similar there. One step at a time, Sarah cautioned, but she was smiling. Let's make sure this works here first. Through the window, she watched as Tommy helped an older veteran off his motorcycle, treating the man's walker with the same respect he once showed his rifle. Nearby, 2 former Vipers were teaching a young veteran's wife how to check her motorcycle's oil. You know what's really changing? Betty asked, sliding into the booth with them. It's not just about veterans finding their way. It's about everyone remembering what community really means. Sarah nodded, thinking about Razor and his daughter, about Tommy rediscovering his warrior spirit in a positive way, about how a moment of confrontation had opened the door to connection. Sometimes, she said, the strongest thing you can do is show others how to be strong. A week after the diner incident, Sarah stood in the Veterans Center parking lot, watching an incredible transformation unfold. What had once been an empty space was now filled with motorcycles, toolboxes, and people working together with purpose. All right, Mrs. Chen, try starting it now, Tommy called out from beneath a restored Harley. The elderly veteran's widow turned the key, and the engine roared to life. Her face lit up with joy. It was her late husband's bike, untouched since his passing 3 years ago. Jack would be so happy, she whispered, tears in her eyes. He always wanted me to learn to ride it. Razor, who now insisted on being called by his real name, Robert, was supervising 3 other Phoenix riders as they taught basic maintenance to a group of young veterans. His daughter Amy sat nearby, doing her homework and occasionally looking up at her father with unmistakable pride. Hey, Captain Mitchell, Robert waved Sarah over. Need your help with something important. Sarah joined him at a makeshift desk they'd set up under a canopy. Spread across it were drawings, plans, and a list of names. What's this? Remember Mrs. Chen's story about her husband's bike? Got me thinking. How many other veteran families out there have bikes sitting in garages collecting dust? Memories just waiting to be brought back to life? Sarah looked at the list. These are all local veterans' families? And active duty, too. We've identified 38 bikes in the county that belong to veterans who've passed or are deployed. We want to restore them all, free of charge, get them running for the families, teach them how to maintain them. That's ambitious, Sarah said, but she was already seeing the potential. There's more, Robert continued. Amy came up with the idea. For the deployed service members' families, we want to offer free maintenance and riding lessons while their loved ones are away. Give them support, something to focus on. Show them they're not alone. A commotion at the entrance drew their attention. Big Mike was leading a group of Road Knights members in, followed by representatives from 3 other legitimate motorcycle clubs. Each bike was loaded with tools and equipment. Heard you folks could use some help. Big Mike grinned. We've got certified mechanics in every club. Time to put those skills to good use. Sarah watched as the parking lot transformed into an organized workshop. Veterans helping veterans, former troublemakers teaching safety courses, families finding new connections through shared memories of their loved ones. Maria appeared at her side. Local news is here. They want to talk about Operation Phoenix Rising. Operation what now? That's what the kids came up with. Maria gestured to where Amy and several other children were painting a banner. They're calling it a revival of veteran legacy through motorcycle restoration. Pretty sophisticated for middle schoolers. The news crew captured something remarkable that day. Not just people fixing motorcycles, but a community healing itself. They interviewed Mrs. Chen, who spoke about feeling close to her husband again. They filmed Amy proudly explaining how her father and his friends were real heroes now, helping other heroes' families. But the most powerful moment came when Tommy led a group of Phoenix Riders in presenting a restored bike to a deployed Marine's pregnant wife. "Your husband's bike is ready for when he comes home," Tommy told her. "And until then, we'll teach you everything you need to know about it. You're part of our family now." Later that evening, Sarah returned to Riverside Diner, exhausted but content. Betty didn't even ask, just brought her coffee and sat down across from her. "Saw the news," Betty smiled. "Those men, they're different now. Robert was in here for lunch with Amy. Paid for a veteran's meal without telling him. Just left a note saying, 'Welcome home, brother.'" Sarah nodded. It's like they finally found what they were looking for all along. Not power over others, but the power to help others. "Speaking of help," Betty lowered her voice. "Heard about the trouble at Murphy's bar last night?" Sarah tensed. "No, what happened?" "A bunch of out-of-town bikers started harassing customers. Before the police could even respond, 6 Phoenix Riders showed up. You know what they did? Bought the troublemakers coffee, sat them down, and talked to them about purpose and respect. 3 of those bikers are coming to your center tomorrow." Sarah couldn't help but laugh. "They're becoming peacekeepers. Just like you," Betty winked. "By the way, someone left something for you." She handed Sarah an envelope. Inside was a child's drawing, a figure in marine dress blues standing beside a motorcycle, surrounded by smiling people. At the bottom, in careful handwriting, "To Captain Mitchell. Thank you for showing my dad how to be a hero again. Love, Amy." Sarah pinned the drawing to the Veterans Center bulletin board the next morning. It joined other symbols of transformation: photos of restored bikes, thank you letters from families, news clippings about the Phoenix Riders community service. But more importantly, it represented something bigger than one viral video or one confrontation in a diner. It showed how a single moment of standing up for what's right could spark a movement of positive change. As Sarah looked out her office window at the busy parking lot, where former enemies now worked side by side helping others, she realized that sometimes the greatest victories don't end with surrender, but with everyone rising together. The success of Operation Phoenix Rising caught attention far beyond their small town. 1 month after the diner incident, Sarah found herself facing a new challenge: expansion. Veterans centers from 3 neighboring states were calling, wanting to know how to start their own Phoenix Riders programs. "We've got a situation," Robert announced, walking into Sarah's office early Monday morning. He wasn't alone. With him was a man Sarah recognized from national news, Senator James Harrison, a decorated combat veteran himself. "Captain Mitchell," the senator extended his hand. "Your program has caught the attention of the Veterans Affairs Committee. We're interested in turning this into a national initiative." Sarah gestured for them to sit. "That's unexpected." "Is it?" The senator pulled out his phone. "The original video has over 50 million views now. But it's what came after that got my attention. You've turned former troublemakers into community leaders. You've given veteran families new purpose. You've created a model that works." Robert spoke up. "We've been getting calls from motorcycle clubs all over the country. They want to reform, want to help veterans like we're doing, but we need structure, resources." "That's where I come in," Senator Harrison explained. "I'm proposing a bill to fund veteran motorcycle restoration programs nationwide based on your Phoenix Riders model, but we need you to help set it up." Sarah leaned back in her chair. "Senator, we're just a small operation." "Not anymore," Robert interrupted. "Show her, Amy." Amy, who had been quietly drawing in the corner, brought over her tablet. On it was a map of the country with dozens of glowing points. "Each light is a place where people want to start Phoenix Riders chapters," she explained proudly. "I've been helping Dad track the requests." The senator nodded approvingly. "This could be revolutionary for veteran support services, combining motorcycle culture with veteran outreach. It speaks to a demographic we've struggled to reach." Before Sarah could respond, Maria burst in. "Sorry to interrupt, but you need to see this." She turned on the office TV. A national morning show was running a segment titled, "From Confrontation to Community, the Phoenix Riders Revolution." The screen showed clips from their recent bike restoration event, interviews with veteran families, and scenes of former gang members teaching motorcycle safety to kids. "This isn't just about bikes anymore," Maria said. "It's about showing people there's always a path to redemption, always a way to serve." The senator stood up. "I'll give you time to think about it, but remember, Captain Mitchell, sometimes the greatest service we can render is showing others how to serve." After he left, Robert stayed behind. "Sarah, we need to talk about Jake." "Jake?" "Leader of the Iron Wolves MC from 2 counties over. They're like what we used to be, maybe worse. He came to see me last night. They want to change, but they don't know how." Sarah sighed. "Robert, I know. We're already stretched thin. But that's why we need this national program. We can't help everyone ourselves, but we can show others how to help themselves." A knock at the door interrupted them. It was Tommy, looking excited. "You're not going to believe this. Remember that group of troubled teens the court ordered to do community service with us? The ones you've been teaching basic maintenance?" Sarah asked. "Yeah. Well, their probation officer just called. Since they started working with us, not one of them has missed a check-in. 3 have gone back to school. 2 got part-time jobs. They're saying our program works better than traditional intervention." Sarah looked at the map on Amy's tablet, at all those points of light representing communities asking for help. She thought about Jake and his Iron Wolves, about troubled teens finding their way, about veteran families reconnecting through their lost loved ones' motorcycles. "Robert," she said finally, "get Jake on the phone. Tell him to bring his leadership here tomorrow. And Amy?" "Yes, Captain Mitchell?" "Think you can help me prepare a presentation for the senator? We're going to need to show exactly how this program can work on a national scale." Amy's face lit up. "Already on it. Dad and I have been making flowcharts and everything." Just then, Betty arrived from the diner with coffee and news. "You'll never guess who just showed up at Riverside. 3 members of the old Steel Vipers who left town before all this started. They saw the morning show and drove back from Texas. They're waiting to talk to you." Sarah looked around her office, at Robert, once her opponent, now one of her strongest allies, at Amy, whose father's transformation had inspired her to dream of helping others, at Tommy, who'd found his way back to the person he'd always wanted to be. "Tell them I'll be there in an hour," she said. "And Betty, we're going to need more coffee. Looks like Riverside Diner is about to become command central for something bigger than we ever imagined." As Betty left, Robert picked up a framed photo from Sarah's desk, the infamous still from the viral video, the moment she'd stood up to protect a frightened family. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "when you took us down that night, you actually lifted us up, showed us who we could be." "That's the thing about real strength," Sarah replied, watching Amy work on her presentation. "It doesn't just win fights, it transforms lives." The Riverside Convention Center had never seen anything quite like this. 300 motorcycle club members from across the country mixed with veterans, social workers, and family support coordinators all gathered for the first National Phoenix Riders Summit. Sarah stood backstage reviewing her notes one last time. "Nervous?" Robert appeared beside her, wearing a new leather vest with the Phoenix Riders emblem, a rising phoenix wrapped around a motorcycle wheel with the words, "Strength through service" beneath. "Not about speaking," Sarah replied. "More about what comes next. Jake's Iron Wolves are here. So are the Desert Raiders from Arizona, the Coast Riders from Florida. All former outlaw clubs looking to change." Robert nodded. "Just like we did. That's what worries me. We're about to teach former rivals how to work together. What if old conflicts resurface?" Robert smiled. "Watch this." He pulled out his phone, showing Sarah a group chat. The screen was filled with photos of restored bikes, veteran family stories, and motorcycle safety class graduations from across the country. "They're already working together. Old rivalries don't matter much when you're focused on serving others." Senator Harrison stepped up to the podium. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the woman who started it all, Captain Sarah Mitchell. The applause was thunderous. Sarah walked out, taking in the scene. In the front row, Amy sat with a group of other kids, all children of former gang members, all wearing Junior Phoenix Riders t-shirts they designed themselves. Behind them, Jake and his Iron Wolves sat next to their former rivals, sharing notes about veteran outreach programs. 2 months ago, Sarah began, I stood up in a diner because it was the right thing to do. I never expected that moment to lead to this. But looking around this room, I see something remarkable. I see former enemies becoming allies. I see troubled pasts transforming into promising futures. She gestured to the screen behind her where photos began to cycle through. In just 8 weeks, Phoenix Riders chapters have restored over 200 veteran-owned motorcycles. We've provided transportation to 83 veterans in need. Our youth mentorship program has helped 47 at-risk teens find better paths. The next slides showed before and after photos of motorcycle clubs. But the most important restoration isn't happening to motorcycles. It's happening to people. Former rival clubs are now working together. Men who once threatened communities are now protecting them. Suddenly, the convention center doors burst open. A group of bikers in unfamiliar colors strode in. The room tensed, but Sarah continued speaking. Like our friends from the Carolina Knights, who just arrived. They rode all night to be here because they heard about what we're doing. Welcome, brothers. You're right on time to hear about Phase 2. The tension dissolved as quickly as it had appeared. The newcomers found seats, welcomed by those around them. Phase 2 is about more than just bikes, Sarah continued. It's about creating a national support network. Every Phoenix Riders chapter will be paired with a veterans center. We're not just fixing motorcycles, we're rebuilding lives, reconnecting families, restoring purpose. She motioned to Tommy, who wheeled out a motorcycle covered by a tarp. This bike belonged to Marine Sergeant David Chen. When he passed, his widow couldn't bear to touch it. Today, thanks to our program, not only is the bike restored, but Mrs. Chen has become one of our riding instructors for military spouses. Mrs. Chen herself walked out to thunderous applause, wearing her own Phoenix Riders vest. The elderly woman beamed as she started the perfectly restored motorcycle, its engine purring like new. This is what we're about, Sarah raised her voice over the applause. Not just remembering fallen heroes, but keeping their legacy alive through service to others. The presentation continued with detailed plans for expansion, training programs, and community integration. But the most powerful moment came during the Q&A, when a young biker from the Carolina Knights stood up. I got a confession to make. His voice shook. We didn't ride all night just to attend. We came because yesterday we were supposed to have a territory war with another club. But then someone showed us the video of what happened in that diner, and what came after. We threw down our weapons and rode here instead. We want to learn how to be better. Sarah looked at Robert, who nodded. Then you're in the right place, she replied. Because every person in this room has a similar story. We're not here to judge your past. We're here to help build your future. The summit continued with breakout sessions led by veteran Phoenix Riders. Robert taught conflict resolution. Tommy ran a workshop on youth mentorship. Mrs. Chen shared her experience connecting with military families. Later that evening, as the sun set over the convention center parking lot filled with motorcycles from across the country, Sarah stood with Betty, watching it all unfold. Did you ever imagine that standing up to those bikers would lead to this? Betty asked, handing Sarah her ever-present coffee. No, Sarah admitted. But that's the thing about doing the right thing. You never know how far the ripples will spread. Just then, Amy ran up with exciting news. Captain Mitchell, the Carolina Knights just pledged their clubhouse as a new veteran support center, and 3 other clubs are doing the same. Sarah smiled, watching as former enemies shared meals, traded stories, and planned a future built on service rather than conflict. The Phoenix was rising, and its wings were spreading far beyond anything she could have imagined. The crisis hit without warning. 3 months after the national summit, Sarah's phone lit up at 2 a.m. with an urgent call from Jake, the former Iron Wolves leader. We've got trouble, Captain. Big trouble. Remember those outlaw clubs we warned you about? The ones who refused to change? They're making their move. Sarah sat up in bed, instantly alert. What kind of move? They're targeting Phoenix Riders chapters. 3 of our bike restoration centers got vandalized last night. They're calling us traitors, saying we've gone soft. But that's not the worst part. What is? They're threatening the veteran families we help. Left warning messages at Mrs. Chen's house. She's scared, Sarah. We all are. Within an hour, Sarah had turned the Veterans Center into a command post. Robert and Tommy coordinated with Phoenix Riders chapters across 6 states. Reports kept coming in. More vandalism, more threats, all targeting their community service programs. They're trying to force us back to our old ways, Robert growled, marking another incident on their map. Want to prove we're still just thugs deep down. Then we prove them wrong, Sarah replied firmly. Get every chapter leader on video conference. Now. As screens lit up around the room, showing concerned faces from across the country, Sarah saw the true strength of what they'd built. Former rivals united, ready to protect what they'd created. Listen up. Sarah's voice carried the authority of her Marine days. This is exactly the test we've trained for. They expect us to retaliate with violence, to prove them right about us. Instead, we're going to show them what the Phoenix Riders really stand for. She laid out the plan. Every restoration center would remain open, but with increased security. Veteran families would have 24-hour protection, not from weapons, but from the constant presence of Phoenix Riders members doing what they did best, building community. Mrs. Chen's house was vandalized, Sarah continued. Tomorrow morning, I want 50 bikes in her driveway, riders fixing her fence, cleaning her yard, teaching motorcycle maintenance to the neighborhood kids. Show them that for every act of destruction, we respond with twice as much creation. Tommy spoke up. The troubled teens in our program are scared. Some of their old gang contacts are pressuring them to choose sides. Then we give them something better to choose, Sarah answered. Launch Operation Legacy ahead of schedule. Get those kids working with veteran families, learning trade skills, earning their own Phoenix Riders vests through community service. The next day, something remarkable happened. When the hostile bikers came to intimidate a Phoenix Riders chapter in Ohio, they found 100 community members forming a peaceful line outside the restoration center. Veterans, families, reformed bikers, and local business owners, all wearing Phoenix Riders support shirts. In Florida, when they tried to threaten a veteran's widow, they found her garage turned into a community gathering spot, with Phoenix Riders teaching motorcycle safety to neighborhood children, while others repaired bikes for disabled veterans. But the real turning point came at Riverside Diner. Betty called Sarah in a panic. A group of outlaw bikers had shown up looking for trouble. By the time Sarah arrived, she found Robert already there, sitting with the hostile bikers, showing them pictures of his daughter Amy teaching other kids about motorcycle maintenance. You think we went soft? Robert was saying. Let me tell you about real strength. Last week, I helped a Marine's widow restart her husband's bike for the first time since he died in Afghanistan. Watched her teach their son how to check the oil, just like his dad used to. That took more courage than any fight I've ever been in. Sarah watched from the doorway as the outlaw bikers listened, their expressions changing from scorn to curiosity. One of them, a younger man with fresh prison tattoos, spoke up. But what about brotherhood? Loyalty? Look around, Sarah stepped forward. This is true brotherhood. Phoenix Riders from 20 states offered to ride here tonight to protect this diner. Not to fight, to serve, to show what loyalty really means. Over the next few hours, more arrived, not to confront the outlaws, but to show them a different path. Tommy brought some of his teen mentees, who proudly demonstrated their mechanical skills. Mrs. Chen arrived with cookies and stories about how the Phoenix Riders had helped her heal from her loss. By midnight, 3 of the outlaw bikers had turned in their colors, asking how they could join the Phoenix Riders program. By dawn, their entire chapter was sitting in Sarah's office, filling out Veteran Support Center volunteer forms. You know what really changed their minds? Robert told Sarah later. It wasn't fear of our numbers. It wasn't even seeing all the good we do. It was realizing they could be part of something bigger than themselves. The crisis had become a catalyst. Over the next week, chapters that had been targeted responded by expanding their community programs. Every act of vandalism was met with a new restoration project. Every threat was answered with an invitation to join their cause. "You were right," Jake told Sarah during an emergency leadership meeting. "The best way to fight darkness isn't with more darkness. It's by shining a light so bright they can't help but see a better way." As Sarah watched the sun rise over the Veterans Center, now protected by a peaceful vigil of Phoenix Riders and community members, she realized that sometimes the greatest victories come not from defeating your enemies, but from showing them they never had to be enemies at all. Today in Washington, an extraordinary scene unfolded on the National Mall, the news anchor reported. Over 10,000 motorcycles, led by Captain Sarah Mitchell and the Phoenix Riders, gathered for what they're calling the Restoration Rally, but this is no ordinary motorcycle event. Sarah watched the coverage from Riverside Diner, surrounded by the original group that had started it all. The television showed aerial shots of motorcycles arranged to form a massive Phoenix design visible from above. What began as a confrontation in a small-town diner has evolved into one of the most successful veteran support programs in recent history, the reporter continued. The Phoenix Riders' response to recent threats against their organization has drawn national attention and praise from military leaders and peace advocates alike. "Turn it up," Betty called, bringing more coffee to their increasingly crowded corner booth. The diner was packed with both locals and visiting Phoenix Riders members who had come to see where it all began. The screen showed Senator Harrison speaking from the Capitol steps. The Phoenix Riders model represents a revolutionary approach to veteran support and community transformation. Today, I'm proud to announce bipartisan support for the Veterans Restoration and Community Integration Act, which will provide federal funding for similar programs nationwide. Robert's daughter Amy, now sporting her own junior Phoenix Riders vest covered in merit badges for community service, bounced excitedly in her seat. "Dad, they're showing your speech next." Sure enough, the coverage cut to Robert standing at the National Mall podium, looking nothing like the intimidating gang leader he'd been just months ago. "We used to think strength meant making others fear us," he was saying. "Captain Mitchell showed us that real strength is using your power to lift others up. Every bike we restore, every veteran we help, every kid we mentor, that's not just community service. That's warrior spirit in action." The diner erupted in cheers as the coverage showed Tommy leading a demonstration of their youth mentorship program. Troubled teens working alongside veterans, learning skills while finding purpose. But perhaps most remarkable, the reporter continued, is how the Phoenix Riders handled the recent threats to their organization. Instead of retaliation, they responded with an expansion of their community programs, turning potential enemies into allies. Sarah's phone buzzed with a message from Jake. "You seeing this? Just got word. 3 more outlaw clubs requesting meetings. They want to learn about the Phoenix program." Maria, who had been quietly taking notes beside Sarah, spoke up. "You know what's really amazing? The numbers just came in. Since the crisis, veteran suicide rates in communities with Phoenix Riders chapters have dropped by 23%. We're actually saving lives." The news coverage shifted to Mrs. Chen, interviewed in her garage-turned-community center. "These people, they didn't just fix my husband's motorcycle," she said, wiping tears. "They helped me turn my loss into a way to help others. Now I teach other military spouses and widows. We heal together." A new segment began, showing the transformation of former gang clubhouses into veteran support centers. The reporter interviewed reformed members working alongside the veterans they once intimidated. "Look at this," Tommy pointed to his phone, showing Sarah a social media trend. #Phoenix Effect was trending, with people sharing stories of how the program had changed their communities. "National headquarters just called," Robert added. "Police departments across the country are reporting decreased gang activity in areas where Phoenix Riders chapters have opened. They're calling it the positive peer pressure effect." Sarah took it all in, the crowded diner, the national coverage, the messages pouring in from around the country. She thought back to that evening when she'd stood up to protect a frightened family, never imagining where it would lead. "You know what's funny?" she said to Betty, who had finally taken a break to sit with them. "Everyone keeps talking about how we changed these bikers, but the truth is, we just showed them who they could be if someone believed in them." "Speaking of belief," Betty grinned, "wait until you see what's coming." The diner's door opened, and in walked a group Sarah never expected. Her old Force Recon unit, led by her former commanding officer. They were followed by representatives from every major veterans organization in the country. "Captain Mitchell," her old CO smiled, "we need to talk about taking the Phoenix program global. Turns out other countries have veterans and troubled bikers too." As the diner filled with more voices, more stories, more plans for the future, Sarah realized that what had started as a single stand against bullying had become something far more powerful. A movement that proved the strongest forces for change aren't the ones that tear things down, but the ones that build people up. Betty brought another round of coffee for everyone, then paused by Sarah's chair. "You know, honey, when you first started coming here, you were trying to leave the warrior life behind. Instead, you showed us all what being a warrior really means." Sarah watched as Amy taught some visiting kids about motorcycle safety, while their parents, former rivals from different clubs, shared stories and plans for new community projects. "Sometimes," she replied, "the hardest battles we fight are the ones that end in peace." The transition to international expansion began in the most unexpected way. Sarah was on a video call with a Phoenix Riders chapter in California when an unusual request came through from the British Royal Marines. "They're calling it Operation Global Phoenix," Robert explained, pulling up emails on the Veterans Center's main screen. "Military units from 12 countries want to adapt our program, but that's not even the surprising part." "What is?" Sarah asked, though she had a feeling she knew what was coming. "Motorcycle clubs. Not just American ones anymore. We're getting requests from groups in Europe, Asia, Australia. They've all seen what happened here." The first test case came from Japan. A group of former Bosozoku riders, members of Japanese motorcycle gangs, had reached out after seeing the Phoenix Riders story go viral on social media. They wanted to work with local veterans and transform their clubs into community support organizations. "But how do we adapt our model to different cultures?" Tommy wondered during the planning meeting. "What works in small-town America might not work in Tokyo." Sarah thought about it for a moment. "Then we let them show us how it should work. We provide the framework. They build it their way." Within weeks, Sarah found herself on a video call with Kenji, a former Bosozoku leader turned community organizer. His group had already started working with Japanese Self-Defense Force veterans, combining motorcycle restoration with traditional Japanese values of honor and service. "We call ourselves the Rising Sun Riders," Kenji explained through an interpreter. "Your Phoenix story showed us how to keep our brotherhood while finding a better purpose." The adaptations were fascinating. In Britain, former outlaw bike clubs worked with Royal Marine veterans to create heritage riders, restoring classic British motorcycles while helping veterans transition to civilian life. In Australia, the program incorporated long-distance outback rides as therapy for PTSD veterans. Back at Riverside Diner, Sarah shared these developments with Betty over the usual coffee. "Look at this," she showed Betty her tablet. The screen displayed photos from around the world. German bikers helping rebuild a veterans memorial, Brazilian riders organizing motorcycle safety courses for favela youth, South Korean chapters working with military families along the DMZ. "It's like watching light spread," Betty mused. "Each country makes it their own, but the heart stays the same." Amy, who had become the unofficial chronicler of the Phoenix movement, was creating a digital map showing the program's global reach. "Every dot is a different story," she explained proudly. "But they're all connected." The real breakthrough came when a United Nations peacekeeping official contacted them. He had an unusual proposal, using the Phoenix Riders model in post-conflict zones to help former combatants reintegrate into society. "Think about it," he urged during a conference call. "If you can turn rival biker gangs into community leaders, why not apply the same principles to regions recovering from war?" Sarah found herself working with an increasingly diverse team. Maria handled cultural adaptation training. Robert coordinated with international motorcycle clubs. Tommy developed youth programs that could work across different societies. The most powerful moment came during the first International Phoenix Riders Summit in Geneva. Former rivals from dozens of countries shared stories of transformation. A British ex-rocker worked alongside a French former gang member to demonstrate their veteran outreach techniques. Japanese Rising Sun Riders taught Australian chapters about incorporating meditation into their program. "You've created something extraordinary," Senator Harrison told Sarah as they watched the summit unfold. "This isn't just veteran support anymore. It's become a model for turning conflict into cooperation." But it was Mrs. Chen who perhaps understood it best. She had been invited to speak about her experience to an international audience. "When I lost my husband," she told the gathered crowd, "I thought I lost everything. The Phoenix Riders didn't just restore his motorcycle. They showed me how to turn grief into purpose. Now I see the same thing happening worldwide. People taking their pain and transforming it into power to help others." The movement kept growing in unexpected ways. In Ireland, former paramilitary members worked together through the program, using motorcycle restoration as a way to heal old wounds. In South Africa, the program brought together veterans from opposite sides of old conflicts. One evening, as Sarah watched video feeds from Phoenix programs around the world, she noticed something remarkable. Whether it was in Tokyo or London, Rio or Berlin, the same scene played out. Former enemies working side by side, teaching young people, helping veterans, building community. "You know what this reminds me of?" Robert said, watching footage from a new chapter in Lebanon. "That night in the diner, when you showed us there was another way to be strong." "But this is different," Sarah replied. "Now they're showing each other. Each new chapter learns from the ones before, then adds their own wisdom to share with those who come after." Betty, ever present with her coffee pot, had the last word. "Maybe that's the real legacy of what happened here. Not just showing people a better way, but giving them the tools to show others." As Sarah looked at the global map of Phoenix Riders chapters, each point of light representing countless lives changed, she realized that sometimes the smallest moments, like standing up to bullies in a diner, can spark changes that cross every border and bridge every divide. The Phoenix had truly risen, and its wings now stretched across the world, carrying a simple but powerful message. True strength isn't about domination, but transformation. And sometimes, the most powerful changes start with a single person willing to stand up for what's right. The United Nations General Assembly has just passed a groundbreaking resolution, the news anchor announced, officially recognizing the Phoenix Riders Initiative as a model for international peacebuilding and veteran support. Sarah watched the broadcast from an unexpected location, the White House Rose Garden. She was there with Robert, Tommy, and representatives from Phoenix Riders chapters worldwide, waiting to meet with the President's Task Force on Veteran Affairs. "Still can't believe this started with a confrontation in my diner," Betty said. She had been specially invited to witness this historic moment and insisted on bringing her coffee pot. "Now look at you, changing international policy." The changes were happening faster than anyone could have predicted. The Phoenix model, as policymakers called it, was being adapted for various social programs worldwide. Schools were using modified versions to handle bullying. Police departments were implementing its principles for community outreach. Captain Mitchell, a senior advisor, approached, tablet in hand. "The UN Secretary General wants to discuss implementing the program in peacekeeping operations. And the European Union is drafting legislation based on your veteran support framework." Before Sarah could respond, her phone buzzed with an urgent message from Kenji in Japan. The Rising Sun Riders had just mediated a decades-old conflict between rival motorcycle groups in Osaka. The solution? Turning their competing workshops into a joint veteran support center. "It's not just about bikes anymore," Robert observed, showing Sarah his own phone. "Look at this. Former gang members in Cape Town using our model to create youth entrepreneurship programs. They're calling it Phoenix Rising Business Mentors." The impact was becoming clearer every day. crime rates were dropping in areas with active Phoenix chapters. Veteran suicide rates continued to decline, but perhaps most significantly, communities were healing in ways no one had expected. "Remember that troubled teen program we started?" Tommy asked. The education department just released the statistics. 92% graduation rate among participants. They're calling it the highest success rate of any intervention program in the country. Amy, now heading the Phoenix Riders Youth Leadership Council, had her own news. "We're launching in 50 new schools next month. Kids who used to join gangs are forming Phoenix clubs instead. They're learning motorcycle maintenance, sure, but they're also learning about service, leadership, and community." The president's speech that day acknowledged something remarkable. "The Phoenix Riders have shown us that the solution to many of our social problems isn't more enforcement, it's more engagement. When we give people a way to be strong by helping others, they choose that path." Later that evening, back at Riverside Diner, Sarah met with an unusual group, policy experts from around the world, all seeking to understand the program's success. "The remarkable thing," a Norwegian sociologist explained, "is how the model adapts to different cultures while maintaining its core principles. In Oslo, former criminal motorcycle clubs are now running the city's largest youth mentorship program." A Brazilian community organizer added, "In Rio's favelas, ex-gang members who joined Phoenix Riders have become more effective at preventing violence than any police initiative. They understand the community because they're part of it." Sarah listened as more stories poured in. In Northern Ireland, Phoenix chapters were bridging old sectarian divides. In Israel and Palestine, joint Phoenix Riders programs were creating neutral spaces where people from both sides could work together. "But how do you ensure it maintains its integrity as it grows?" a policy advisor asked. "How do you prevent it from losing its way?" Sarah smiled and pointed to the diner's window. Outside, Robert was teaching a group of kids basic motorcycle maintenance while their parents, a mix of veterans, former gang members, and community leaders, shared coffee and conversation. "Because it's not built on rules or regulations," she explained. "It's built on transformation. Every person who changes becomes living proof that the program works. They become the guardians of its integrity." Maria, who had been quietly taking notes, spoke up. "Look at the data. In every country where we've established chapters, we see the same pattern. First, crime rates drop. Then, veteran support participation increases. Finally, community engagement rises across all demographics. It's like a positive infection," Betty added, refilling coffee cups. "Once people see it working, they want to be part of it." The policy experts were fascinated by the diner itself, how this simple restaurant had become both the birthplace and the heart of a global movement. They took notes as regular customers interacted with Phoenix Riders members, watching how naturally the program had woven itself into the community's fabric. "You know what's really revolutionary about this?" a Canadian policymaker observed. "It's showing that the best way to help veterans isn't to treat them as victims who need help, but as warriors who need purpose." Sarah watched as Amy led a group of international youth representatives through their new peer mentorship curriculum. The teenager who had once been afraid of her father's biker lifestyle was now teaching others how to transform their own communities. "The real policy change," Sarah said finally, "isn't happening in government buildings. It's happening right here, in diners and garages and community centers around the world. We're not just changing laws, we're changing hearts." As the evening wound down, Betty brought one last round of coffee for everyone. The policy experts had long since put away their notebooks, drawn into the genuine warmth and connection they felt in this unexpected cradle of global change. "You know what they don't tell you in all those policy papers?" Betty asked, sitting down with them. "Sometimes the biggest changes start with the smallest moments of courage. Sometimes all it takes is one person willing to stand up and show others a better way." The newest challenge facing the Phoenix Riders emerged from an unexpected quarter. A homeless veteran living under a bridge in Detroit had been discovered by local chapter members. His story went viral, not because of his situation, but because of who he was. "That's Colonel James Wright," Sarah told the emergency leadership meeting at the Veterans Center. Former Special Forces, 3 Silver Stars, saved an entire village in Afghanistan. Now he's living on the streets because he couldn't adjust to civilian life. We've got to do something, Robert insisted. This isn't just about one veteran anymore. This is showing us a gap in our program. The colonel's situation had exposed a harsh truth. Even with all their success, they were still missing some of the most vulnerable veterans. Those who had fallen through every crack, who couldn't even make it to a veterans center or Phoenix Riders meeting. I've got an idea, Tommy said, pulling up blueprints on the main screen. We've got all these former clubhouses we've converted. What if we turn them into transitional housing? Not just places to sleep, but full rehabilitation centers. Sarah studied the plans. We'd need more than just mechanics and mentors. We'd need healthcare providers, counselors, job trainers. Already on it, Maria interrupted, walking in with a stack of papers. Remember all those professionals who joined Phoenix Riders chapters? We've got doctors, therapists, social workers, all willing to volunteer. The initiative they developed was called Phoenix Nests, safe houses for veterans in crisis, staffed by Phoenix Riders members and professional volunteers. Each one would combine housing with job training, mental health support, and most importantly, a built-in community. But here's the real innovation, Robert explained, pointing to the garage areas and the blueprints. Every Phoenix Nest will have a working motorcycle restoration shop. Residents can learn trade skills while helping other veterans. They're not just receiving help, they're part of giving it. The first Phoenix Nest opened in Detroit, with Colonel Wright not just as a resident, but as a program advisor. His military experience and personal struggle made him uniquely qualified to help design the support system. You know what the hardest part was? The colonel told Sarah during the opening ceremony. Not being homeless, it was feeling useless. This program gives us back our purpose. Within months, Phoenix Nests were opening across the country. Each one became more than just a shelter. They were transformation centers, where veterans could rebuild their lives while helping others rebuild theirs. But the program soon faced an unexpected challenge. A prominent politician began criticizing the Phoenix Riders, claiming they were enabling homeless veterans rather than solving the root problems. Sarah found herself defending the program on national television. We're not enabling, we're empowering. Every veteran who comes through our doors becomes part of the solution. They're not just receiving help, they're becoming help givers themselves. The debate sparked something unexpected. Other marginalized groups began reaching out to the Phoenix Riders, asking about adapting the model for their communities. We've got former gang members wanting to open Phoenix Nests for at-risk youth, Tommy reported. Recovered addicts want to create similar programs for people fighting substance abuse. It's like watching the next evolution, Betty observed one evening at the diner, as she served coffee to a mixed group of Phoenix Nest residents and volunteers. You started by helping bikers become community servants. Now you're helping everyone find their way to serve. The impact was undeniable. Phoenix Nest residents weren't just getting off the streets, they were becoming community leaders. Colonel Wright now ran veteran outreach training for police departments. Other graduates were opening small businesses, mentoring youth, and running support programs. You want to know the real success story? Maria asked, showing Sarah the latest statistics. 87% of Phoenix Nest graduates are now actively involved in community service. They're not just surviving, they're thriving by helping others thrive. The program kept evolving. Phoenix Nests began offering specialized support for female veterans, LGBTQ+ veterans, and veterans with families. Each new challenge they encountered led to new solutions, all built on the same principle: transformation through service. Remember when we thought this was just about fixing motorcycles? Robert laughed, watching a group of Phoenix Nest residents teaching motorcycle maintenance to homeless teens. It never was, Sarah replied. The motorcycles were just the bridge. This was always about fixing people by showing them they could help fix others. As the sun set over the latest Phoenix Nest facility, Sarah watched a new resident arrive, a young veteran, looking lost and broken, just as Colonel Wright had been. But this time, he was greeted not by social workers, but by other veterans who had walked his path and found their way back. "Welcome home, brother," Colonel Wright said, extending his hand. Ready to become part of something bigger than yourself? The young veteran looked around at the busy workshop, where residents and volunteers worked side by side, each person both receiving and giving help. His shoulders straightened slightly as he nodded. "That's what we're really building here," Sarah told Betty later at the diner. "Not just nests for broken birds, but launching pads for new phoenixes." Betty smiled, watching through the window as Phoenix Riders members escorted another homeless veteran to safety. From one woman standing up to bullies in a diner, to a movement that lifts up the fallen worldwide. Now that's what I call rising from the ashes. When the earthquake hit Mexico City, no one expected motorcycle clubs to be among the first responders. But within hours, Phoenix Riders chapters from across the Americas were mobilizing. "We've got hundreds of bikes ready to move," Robert reported during an emergency video conference. "Phoenix chapters from Texas to Panama are converging. They can get into areas where bigger vehicles can't reach." Sarah watched the operations map as hundreds of dots moved toward Mexico City. Each one represented a Phoenix Rider, many of them veterans with disaster response training, all of them ready to help. "This is what we trained for," Tommy added, coordinating with international chapters. "Remember those emergency response drills we started doing? They're about to pay off." The first images from Mexico City showed something remarkable. Columns of motorcycles, each bearing the Phoenix Riders emblem, weaving through debris-choked streets carrying medical supplies, water, and emergency equipment. Former gang members who once terrorized communities were now risking their lives to save them. "Look at this," Maria called out, pointing to her screen. The Rising Sun Riders from Japan had deployed their specialized rescue teams, bringing expertise from their own earthquake experiences. British Heritage Riders were coordinating with Royal Marine veteran units to establish emergency communications. But it was the local transformation that proved most powerful. Mexican motorcycle clubs that had once been rivals were now working together under the Phoenix banner, their knowledge of local streets and communities proving invaluable. "We're getting requests from other disaster zones," Sarah told the emergency response team. "Hurricane in the Philippines, floods in Bangladesh, wildfires in Australia. Everyone wants to know if we can replicate this response model." "Why not?" Robert asked. "We've got chapters worldwide now, each one trained in emergency response, each one ready to serve." The Mexico City operation became a template. Phoenix Riders developed into a unique kind of disaster response force, mobile, agile, and deeply connected to local communities. Their motorcycle skills allowed them to reach places larger organizations couldn't, while their community connections helped them understand where help was needed most. Back at Riverside Diner, Betty kept the coffee flowing as Sarah coordinated with international teams. The diner had become an unofficial command center, its walls now covered with maps and emergency response plans. "Just heard from Kenji," Tommy announced, rushing in. "Rising Sun Riders are developing a new emergency response training program. They want to teach other chapters their earthquake rescue techniques." Sarah nodded, studying reports from Mexico City. Phoenix Riders weren't just delivering supplies. They were transforming the way communities responded to disaster. Former rivals worked together, gang members became community heroes, and the motorcycle clubs once feared by neighborhoods were now their strongest protectors. "Captain Mitchell," a FEMA official called on the video link, "We need to talk about integrating the Phoenix response model into our standard protocols. What you're doing, it's revolutionary." But the real breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A former cartel member in Mexico City, watching Phoenix Riders help his community, approached a local chapter. "We have bikes," he said. "We know these streets. Teach us how to help instead of harm." Within weeks, similar requests were coming in from troubled regions worldwide. Groups that had once been part of the problem wanted to become part of the solution. "It's expanding beyond anything we imagined," Maria observed, showing Sarah the latest data. Phoenix chapters are becoming first responders in their communities, not just for disasters, but for any crisis. The transformation was particularly visible in how communities responded to Phoenix Riders now. Where once people had locked their doors at the sound of motorcycles, they now came out to greet them, knowing these riders brought help, not fear. "Remember when we thought standing up to bullies in a diner was a big deal?" Betty asked, watching Phoenix riders load supplies for their next mission. "It still was," Sarah replied. "Because that's what we're still doing, just on a bigger scale. Standing up to bigger bullies, disaster, poverty, hopelessness." The Mexico City operation concluded with an unexpected ceremony. Local officials presented Phoenix riders with the city's highest civilian honor. But what moved Sarah most was watching former rival gang members ride together under the Phoenix emblem, their old conflicts forgotten in the shared mission of helping others. "You've shown us something important," the Mexico City mayor said during the ceremony, "that the same spirit that once made people feared can be transformed into a force that makes them heroes." As Sarah watched Phoenix riders from dozens of countries working together, she realized they'd created something unprecedented, a global rapid response force born from the very group society once considered its biggest problems. "You know what really changed?" Robert asked, standing beside her. "We stopped seeing ourselves as part of the chaos and started seeing ourselves as part of the solution." The evening news showed Phoenix riders helping rebuild homes in Mexico City, former enemies working side by side, each wearing the emblem of the rising Phoenix. But now that Phoenix meant something more, it represented not just personal transformation, but the power to transform disaster into hope, conflict into cooperation, and fear into protection. "Next time," Sarah told her international response team, "we'll be even better prepared, because that's what Phoenixes do. They don't just rise from ashes, they help others rise too." The call came from the United Nations Peacekeeping Office. In a conflict zone halfway across the world, two warring factions had requested something unprecedented. They wanted Phoenix riders to mediate their peace talks. "They've seen what we did with rival gangs and motorcycle clubs," Sarah explained to her leadership team. "Now they want to apply those same principles to actual warfare." "But we're not diplomats," Tommy protested. "We're just people who learned how to turn enemies into allies," Robert finished. "Maybe that's exactly what they need." The situation was in a region torn by decades of ethnic conflict. Both sides had seen videos of how Phoenix riders transformed rival bike gangs into cooperative forces during the Mexico City disaster response. "If you can make hostile bikers work together," their message read, "maybe you can help us find a way to peace." Sarah found herself in a UN conference room, facing leaders from both factions. With her were Robert, Tommy, and representatives from Phoenix chapters worldwide, each bringing their own experience with transformation. "Before we begin," Sarah said, "I want you to meet someone." She gestured to a screen where Mrs. Chen appeared, speaking from Riverside Diner. "She's going to tell you about real strength." Mrs. Chen shared her story, about loss, about healing, about finding purpose in helping others. As she spoke, Sarah watched the hardened faces of the faction leaders soften. "Now," Sarah continued, "let me show you something else." She played videos of former rival gang members working together during disasters, of enemies becoming allies through shared service. "Your weapons make you feel strong," Robert added, speaking from experience. "We thought our bikes and colors made us strong too. But real strength? That comes from protecting others, not hurting them." The breakthrough came when Tommy suggested a radical idea. "Before we talk peace, let's work together on something concrete. Your communities need rebuilding. Let's start there." What followed was unprecedented. Under Phoenix riders' guidance, former enemies began working together on community restoration projects. Just as rival bikers had learned to cooperate by fixing motorcycles, opposing factions found common ground in rebuilding schools and hospitals. "It's the Phoenix principle," Maria explained to UN observers. "When people focus on serving others together, their own conflicts become less important." Back at Riverside Diner, Betty kept the news playing as reports came in from the conflict zone. "Look at that," she said proudly, watching former enemies working side by side under the Phoenix banner. The transformation wasn't instant, but it was profound. As with the motorcycle clubs, The key was giving people a way to be strong by helping others rather than dominating them. "You're not just negotiating peace," a UN official told Sarah. "You're building it from the ground up." The success caught the attention of other conflict zones. Requests started coming in from around the world: Northern Ireland, the Balkans, Central Africa. Everyone wanted to learn the Phoenix method of transformation. But how do we scale this? Sarah wondered aloud during a late-night strategy session at the diner. "The same way we did with the bikes," Robert answered. "We teach them to teach others." They developed what they called Phoenix Peace Teams, mixed groups of former enemies who had learned to work together, now training others to do the same. The most powerful moment came when Kenji from the Rising Sun Riders arrived with an unexpected delegation, former Japanese and Korean bike gang members, now working together to promote peace in their region. "We were enemies for generations," Kenji explained. "Now we're showing our communities how to move beyond old hatreds." Sarah watched as the model replicated itself across conflicts worldwide. Just as the Phoenix Riders had spread from one small-town diner to become a global force for veteran support and disaster response, now they were becoming architects of peace. "The fascinating thing," a conflict resolution expert observed, "is how the motorcycle culture actually helps. These were people who already understood brotherhood and loyalty. You just helped them redirect it towards something positive." One evening, as Sarah watched Phoenix Peace Teams working in yet another conflict zone, Betty brought her the usual coffee and a question. "Did you ever imagine, when you stood up to those bullies in here, that you'd end up changing how the whole world thinks about conflict?" Sarah looked around the diner, now decorated with photos from Phoenix operations worldwide, disaster responses, veteran support programs, and now peace initiatives. "You know what I've learned?" she replied. "The principles are always the same, whether it's a confrontation in a diner or a war zone. Show people a better way to be strong, give them a chance to help others, and watch transformation happen." The news showed more Phoenix Peace Teams deploying to new regions, each carrying the message that had started in this small diner, that true strength comes not from domination, but from protection and service. "We're not just riding motorcycles anymore," Robert said, watching the coverage. "We're riding hope into places that forgot what hope feels like." The Phoenix Riders had become more than a movement. They were now a symbol of hope that transcended boundaries. Across the world, communities had embraced their ethos of strength through service, proving that even the most unlikely people could ignite change. At the United Nations General Assembly, Sarah stood alongside Robert, Kenji, Maria, and Colonel Wright. The assembly hall was packed with dignitaries, veterans, and community leaders from every corner of the globe. On the massive screen behind them, a montage of Phoenix Riders' work played, restoring bikes, rebuilding disaster-stricken towns, and mediating peace in war-torn regions. Today, we celebrate not just the accomplishments of the Phoenix Riders, but the countless lives they've touched, the Secretary General said. "They have shown us that when we invest in people, even though society once feared, we create ripples of change that uplift everyone." Sarah stepped to the podium. Her voice was calm but powerful, carrying the same conviction that had once silenced a gang leader in a small-town diner. "When I first stood up in Riverside Diner, I thought I was just protecting a family. I didn't realize that moment would grow into a movement that would unite people across cultures, borders, and beliefs. The truth is, every one of us has the power to create change. Sometimes, it starts with something as simple as standing up for what's right." She paused, letting her words settle over the audience. The Phoenix Riders aren't just about motorcycles or veterans. They're about transformation. They're about proving that no matter how far someone has fallen, they can rise again and help others do the same. The assembly erupted into applause, but Sarah's work wasn't done. She met with global leaders, sharing the blueprint for the Phoenix model, now adapted into education systems, disaster responses, and reconciliation programs. Each new chapter carried the same spark that had ignited in that diner years ago. Back in Riverside Diner, life had returned to its familiar rhythm, almost. Betty poured coffee for a group of local Phoenix Riders, their patches gleaming with pride. On the wall, a world map showed pins marking every active chapter, each representing thousands of lives transformed. Sarah sat in her usual booth, her notebook open. Across from her, Amy worked on a design for the next Phoenix Writers Summit, now an annual event. "What's the theme this year?" Sarah asked. Amy grinned. "Rising Together." Betty approached with a fresh pot of coffee. "You know, honey, people keep asking me if I ever thought my little diner would be the birthplace of a global movement." "What do you tell them?" Sarah asked, smiling. "I tell them it always starts small. A diner, a cup of coffee, one person brave enough to stand up. Then the world changes." Through the window, Sarah saw a new group of writers arrive, some young, some old, but all wearing the same emblem of the rising phoenix. They were greeted with handshakes, laughter, and the unmistakable hum of belonging. As the sun set over the small town, its warm glow reflected on the diner's windows. Sarah closed her notebook, watching as the next generation of Phoenix writers prepared to carry the legacy forward. "Betty," she said, raising her cup, "to rising together." "To rising together," Betty echoed, her smile as bright as the Phoenix emblem on Sarah's jacket. And so, the story of the Phoenix Writers continued, not just as a tale of transformation, but as a living testament to the power of standing up, lifting others, and proving that, together, we can rise from any ashes.